listeners out there to another episode of the Savior Radio Show. And if you're tuning in for the first time, this show has been established to shed some light on the divine call of Ahmad al-Hasan, peace be upon him, and to introduce some of his books and teachings to the English-speaking world. Now, before we carry on with our discussion this week, I would like to give out the call-in number to our phone lines. That number is 248-557-3300. I will repeat that. It's 248-557-3300. And if you have any questions about our discussion this week, feel free to give us a call on this line at 248-557-3300. And the listeners can also connect with us on Facebook at the Savior Radio Show. And you can leave any comments, questions, or suggestions for our show, and we'll be sure to address those. So without further ado, we would like to get into our discussion. And our discussion this week is a continuation of last week's episode, which was circling around a truly spellbinding book titled The Atheism Delusion, written by Ahmad al-Hasan. Now, this book has been translated in English and is available for free, so I recommend all the listeners to grab a copy. It's very easy to get the copy of the book. You can download it for free simply by visiting thesaviorofmankind.com, and the listeners can also access the book by visiting the Facebook page if you're a Facebooker more than visiting websites. So that has also been established. And you can do that by simply searching for the Atheism Delusion on Facebook and by clicking on the appropriate links. So joining the discussion today around Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 is Mr. Kareem and Mr. Mohammed Al-Mathrouk, joining us from Kuwait. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Alhamdulillah. Thanks for having me, brother.
Very well, thank you, brother.
Pleasure having you guys on the show. You know, last week's episode was very interesting indeed, and you guys were having a strong discussion around Chapter 1, and we wanted to quickly recap some of the things that were discussed in the previous show. And you know, we'll be moving down and discussing nearer thoughts and ideas in the chapter. And I think where the discussion left off on last week's episode was around the explanation that we receive against evolution from a variety of different religious scholars, both Islamic and Christian. And you know, a lot of them still seem to be opposed to the concept of evolution. I would say the Islamic scholars predominantly are still in opposition of it, whereas the Christian church has started to come around, and it's becoming harder to deny the scientific evidence that we have for evolution. So I guess my question to you guys today, and you know, you can take turns, or you know, just a general discussion on why do you guys feel that the religious scholars that are out today and represent the different sects, be it to Christianity or Islam, why do you think they are still in opposition of the theory of evolution today? What do you think the major reason for that is, guys?
Like in my view, I believe that the major reason for them opposing against the theory of evolution is that they don't know that it's already a fact, and there's like a lot of scientific basis that supports the theory of evolution. When it comes to like comparative anatomy, it supports the theory of evolution. Historical geology, it supports the theory of evolution. Also, you have, for example, genetic science, and genetic science supports the theory of evolution greatly. And genetic science itself contributed greatly to, like, for example, I mean, we led to the discovery of vaccinations, antibiotics, things that helped people's lives and from dying, and it all comes down to, like, with the help and the contribution of the theory of evolution, and with the discovery of these, like, sciences, it helps the human being to develop, whether it's in his way of thinking or in technology and other means. So to say that the theory of evolution is just false makes the person very unscientific in this manner, and it really requires the person to go deeply in researching and knowing, taking like an academic approach towards like researching and finding out what theory of evolution means. Like the men of religion nowadays, they lack the basic fundamentals and the basic concepts of understanding what the theory of evolution. So once they try to refute evolutionary biologists and try to refute biologists, it just shows that they're lacking the capacity to even comprehend what the theory of evolution is talking about. And so they propose arguments. Like, for example, I'll give you like an example from Sheikh al-Ashqar. And Sheikh al-Ashqar, he has a book called Belief in Allah, and he tried to refute the theory of evolution. When he says, the Jews and the Muslims after them have been circumcising their sons for centuries, but this has not led to any of their children being born circumcised. The more science advances, the more Darwin's theory is proven wrong. Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan says, Ashqar's reference to circumcision shows that he understands nothing about the theory of evolution. So basically, Sheikh al-Ashqar tries to refute the theory of evolution. He tries to refute it by saying, like, look, circumcision is, like, it's not handed down and it's not passed down the lineage of people to the next generation. Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan says, reference to circumcision shows that he understands nothing about the theory of evolution. What does circumcision or tradition have to do with the theory of evolution? Evolution occurs due to the presence of a favored genetic trait acquired by the organism. So basically, this is one of the examples of someone who is a cleric, who is a graduate of Al-Azhar University, and he's a scholar. When he wants to refute the theory of evolution, he comes up with something that has nothing to do with the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution consists of heredity, it consists of reproduction, it consists of variation and natural selection. So he didn't like refute the theory of evolution by just like he just came up with circumcision. It has nothing to do with the theory of evolution. That's not really refuting evolution. You need scientific facts to refute evolution, not something that is a surgical procedure like circumcision. So yeah, this is one of the points, or one of the arguments of Sheikh al-Ashqar, who is a cleric from Al-Azhar University. So yeah, up to you.
Yeah, brother. I also want to add to that. Basically, I mean, you mentioned that it's definitely, for example, circumcision is not. It doesn't have anything to do with evolution. It's basically, like you said, a tradition, and basically, that's the problem. I think people, it's a surgical procedure. I mean, just how learning how to walk, things like that. But I mean, we just need to clarify, I think, that the evolution basically, happens. What is evolution basically? And there's different, I think, understandings of it. Like transmutation, for example, where we can just say, oh, humans came from apes, just like that, like magically.
Yeah, there's the single burst creationism concept. The single burst creationism concept is believing in that, for example, that a cell transformed into an animal millions of years ago, just like that, without including the cumulative steps between, or that there are like slow steps a series of slow steps that lead to that final stage. So excluding these cumulative steps in between this transformation makes that's how the single burst creationism concept, that's how they come up with that argument. But the true argument from Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan is multiple burst creationism, and that can be proven easily through historical geology. Like when we're talking about the Earth's layers, the Earth's layers, there's a layer on top of the other one, and once we examine these layers according to historical geology, we can find the dates of each layer. That there is a layer, an earth or a rock layer, basically it contains complex organisms. As you go to the top, the more complex the organisms are, and as you go down to the bottom of these layers, the more primitive the organisms are, and more simple the organisms are. So proving evolution through multiple bursts in this manner, in this way, proves that there has to be cumulative steps in between, throughout these stages until we reach the final stage, which is the most complex organisms. That's where they have arisen. So unfortunately, a lot of people, they try to say that theory of evolution is false because there is no, they try to negate or cancel out these cumulative steps. So it's pretty unfortunate, to be honest. And but that is the scientific approach to it. That's the scientific approach.
I mean, yeah, if you wanted to just, for all the religious people out there, I mean, if you wanted to refer to the holy books, I mean, don't they mention the creation happening in stages? I mean, from where did they get this theory that it's just one shot, single burst?
Yeah, the other thing is that people think, actually, those who are you can say they're ignorant about evolution, they think that things happen, they actually tag on arguments to the evolutionary biologists. Like, for example, Charles Darwin says about something concerning when it comes to when it comes to evolution, how he describes evolution, there are men of religion that tag on arguments to Charles Darwin when he never said. Like when he was talking about evolution, okay, there's this imaginary dialogue by Sheikh Shirazi. I think we have already mentioned that he basically tags on arguments to Charles Darwin about the vertical, that he divides evolution into vertical evolution and horizontal evolution, while he never ever mentioned anything in his book Origin of Species about that. But through this imaginary dialogue that Sheikh Shirazi created, he's trying to make Charles Darwin look like a fool, but through basically tagging on arguments to him when he never said. So this is one of the ways of how, or one of the that's what they do in order to make
twisting and turning,
biologists look bad.
Yeah, so, in fact, all the facts that are proven against these allegations, I mean, historical geology is not a trick. It's not meant to deceive us. Like when I talked about the Earth's layers, I mean, as when we said that the topmost Earth layer has the complex organisms and the bottommost Earth layer has the primitive organisms, and the stages in between and this development, I mean, this is not something to trick us, to deceive us. This is evolution right there in your face. So you cannot deny something that is that stands out in front of your faces. So we either have to refute it, or say that God has, say that God has tricked us, or just accept it, that this is from God. This is the plan of God. This is something that God intervened into making it. So it's the most scientific way. God is with science. He's not opposing science. And men of religion, unfortunately, they have they push the agenda of trying to oppose
science without them knowing. They don't know what evolution means, and so they ended up basically targeting God's principles of life, of creation, without them knowing. They're trying to basically denounce the creation of God without them knowing. So it's this is one of the things that
basically,
they ignorantly.
They can't really, they don't haven't understood it well enough to be able to refute it. Just make it clear for all the listeners that basically what the Imam alayhi salam has come forth with is all scientifically based. It's not opinions, and all these opinions of the non-working scholars or the men of religion have just turned around and slapped them in the face, if you will. This ignorance, basically, trying to refute it. It's very, very clear.
Even when it comes to the universe, for example, the Center of Belief Researchers of Sistani, Sayyid Sistani, they took the argument of Henry Morris, and Henry Morris basically believes that the second law of thermodynamics, it violates, for example, the theory of evolution violates the second law of thermodynamics. Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan proves that it does not violate the second law of thermodynamics. It actually, what he said is that, basically in the second law of thermodynamics, it dictates that there's an increase of entropy within a closed system. Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan says that when we look at the Earth itself, parts of it, there is increase in disorder, and other parts there's a decrease in disorder. Entropy is disorder, basically chaos and disintegration and other things. So what they proposed, meaning Henry Morris and Sheikh Al-Qurani from Center of Belief Researchers, what they proposed is that the universe is headed towards disintegration and disorder. But through scientific facts, through the Doppler effect, through the cosmic background radiation, through also the supernova observations, they all prove that the universe is not headed towards collapse and disintegration. It's headed towards basically expansion. It's being multiplied and being added to. So it's not according to what they're thinking. So this is there's science and there's something that opposes science, and what they're moving along, meaning the Center of Belief Researchers and Henry Morris, it's opposing science. Science of today says that the universe is expanding. It's being multiplied, being added to, and it's not headed toward disintegration. So this is the problem that we're having. We're having a side that supports science, and that's the side which Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan is with. He's with the scientific facts. He's with what science has showed us. As for those who oppose, they're not with science, and that's why Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan has a very strong stand against them. He tries to clarify the lucid points, the truth in his book, Atheism, Delusion.
Right. We believe in evolution. We believe in non-randomness. We believe in a law. We believe in purpose of the creation. Basically, what does the atheists how do they counter this basically they say there's no speaker behind it, when clearly we have a language here proven, through research and science. We have a language, like DNA is its own language.
Genetic language, yes.
Genetic language.
Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan mentions something about this in his book. In page 57, he says, is it possible for us to say that the plans for a building or a bridge, when successfully implemented, meaning the plans being successfully implemented, obey laws, are written in an engineering language, and that the one who wrote it is conscious, yet not say the same when we see the genetic plan implemented and functional? So genetic plan is something tied to the, it's tied to the theory of evolution. Through genetic science, you need genetic science for the theory of evolution. So Sayyid Ahmed Hassan says, the same when we see the genetic plan implemented and functional. Does our language indicate that we are conscious of meanings and intended meanings, yet the genetic language does not indicate that its creator or speaker realizes and intends to achieve a particular meaning or purpose with it? So this tells you, like, for example, if you're like living in a house, it's engineered by someone, and you like respect that engineer for such an engineering design. But when it comes to like genetic language within our genes, they're expressed through genetic language. So who's the speaker of this language? Who's the one that intends to achieve a particular meaning or purpose with it? The one who put the purpose to this language, to this genetic language. Who is it? So one has to ask himself and not be self-contradictory with such things. He has to, be wise. That there is a lawmaker, there is a law-abiding force in this great creation, in this complexity, in this development, and all that is tied within, the creation of God. And of course, atheists would always take that stance of opposing the idea that there is a creator or there is a purpose behind things.
Tell me, Brother Muhammad, I mean, when they bring up this theory, basically, where they say, I mean, how slim are the chances of their theory where they say living matter produced a self-replicator? I mean, how far-fetched is that? I mean, isn't it a great opportunity to look for the lawmaker or the speaker behind it, to contemplate like within yourself?
Richard Dawkins, he like in chapter 6 of his book, I think, Blind Watchmaker, he said that it's all like a chance event, it's a coincidence that that life emerged at the very beginning of the earth, like 3.5 billion years ago. He said that this is a chance event. Well, he just completely excluded the idea that it could be a miracle, that it is a miracle. So he goes into these mathematical calculations and gives so many different possibilities, like so many different possibilities. There's a possibility that he gave that the number of it is like 4 and 41 zeros after that 4, a number of possibilities that there could be like a chance of, like for example,
of a spark, if you will,
Yeah, he took into account the chance of life emerging from non-living matter through a neutron star. This neutron star, it basically affected a meteor before that meteor like reaches the Earth. So I did contain that this meteor was loaded with left-handed amino acids, and so these left-handed amino acids, they were the reason behind the emergence of life through non-living matter. So this was his hypothesis. It's not based on science. It's not a scientifically based
well, it
argument.
hasn't been proven, to say the least.
Yeah, so he basically excluded that a miracle happened, but he's willing to believe in this, and he just doesn't want to believe that it's a miracle. He even has more hypotheses. This is not the only one. There's a lot of different hypotheses. Like there could be like non-chemical substances like clay particles, crystalline, and other things, and the hypotheses go on and on. In terms of Richard Dawkins.
Basically, I mean, it's clear to anyone that wants to do research that it's basically his arrogance, his unwillingness to admit that he's reached a dead end. Hence, we have Sayyid Ahmed Hassan, peace be upon him, divine intervention, if you will. Basically, with everything relative to science, I mean, all of their research, all of their theories, the Imam alayhi salam brings the missing link, if you will, between religion and all these theories. He doesn't, I mean, one of the main things we just want to make clear here is that we believe in evolution. We believe in the proven sciences, and we're not refuting anything based on opinions. So when the Imam alayhi salam wrote this book, the Atheism Delusion, he actually wrote it, I mean, in stages as well. I mean, you just have to start with chapter 1, and then you can see the different lies and the delusion and the claims that people have made, and he slowly takes you like towards the purpose, and there is a purpose, you know, and he brings it up in the first and second chapter. And yes, brother.
You know, there's something that I want to add, like from the book, especially from chapter 2, when it comes to like comparative anatomy, because Richard Dawkins and the rest of the atheists, they've you know, proposed an argument to those who believe in God, saying, look, if you believe in intelligent design, then how come you know, the giraffe's laryngeal nerve, there's a detour, meaning that the nerve of the giraffe, it starts from the brain, it loops around the heart, and then ends up to the pharynx. So how come it goes all the way, like, around the heart, and needs like such a you know, such a long nerve
detour? Yeah, right.
Yeah, why couldn't it be short? You know, the Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan, he says, the laryngeal nerve has taken this unnecessary turn because it wasn't originally designed for each animal independently. It traveled from the brain down to where the chest starts and returned to the upper larynx. This is proof of evolution and development, because in each evolutionary step, the lengthening of the nerve by tiny increments was much easier than making a direct connection. Otherwise, if the body of each animal was designed and created independently, the nerve would be directly connected, and the economical waste resulting from designing a nerve of this length, as in the giraffe, for example, would be unnecessary. So,
right.
Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan even like talks about, like, for example, the fish. He says, in fish, this nerve travels from the brain to the gill after looping around the heart. So he then says, now if the body of each animal was designed independently and didn't evolve from fish, this nerve would directly connect the brain to the upper part of the larynx, since there is just a short distance between them. So Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan, peace be upon him, what I've understood from what he said is that the giraffe evolved from a fish, but we're talking here cumulative steps, very slow steps in evolution, very slow evolutionary stages, millions and millions of years in between. And so this, as what he calls it, historical inheritance, this historical inheritance goes way back millions of years ago, when, you know, the fish, because when we looked at the fish, the nerve of the fish travels from the brain to the gill after looping around the heart. So when we look at the giraffe, you know, this detour is an you know, historical inheritance from the fish. Right. So we believe in evolution, you know, as believers in evolution, and that it you know, concurs with religious texts, and we have religious texts and verses from the Holy Quran that is in favor of evolution. It supports evolution. So right. If we believe in evolution, it doesn't really go against our religion, since we believe in it. If we didn't believe in it, then that's something else. That's what the men of religion have to say about. You know, that's their argument. That's not ours. Ours is that our stance is alongside the theory of evolution.
Right, but they can't explain it at the end of the day. I mean, they can't, you know, explain how everything, for example, came about. How they can't disprove the science, the main facts. You know, like the detour of the laryngeal nerve, which almost poses a threat to the giraffe, for example, when it takes that long detour. But I mean, it does disprove their single burst theory, basically, as you've mentioned, brother, where it's actually a millions year old trait, basically with the fish. And you know, another thing is, actually, yeah, you also mentioned it's mentioned in the Holy Book, the Quran, and actually the Book of Genesis also has the story of creation. People, our Christian brothers and sisters, can refer to.
I'll just read some verses from the Holy Quran that speak of evolution. Like, for example, there's a verse that says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. It says here, والله أنبتكم من الأرض نباتا, that God has caused you to grow from the earth just like a plant. وخلقكم أطوارا, he also says وخلقكم أطوارا, and this is in chapter 71 verse 14. وقد خلقكم أطوارا, meaning we created you in stages. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He created the creation in stages. He created you in stages. So when we talked about cumulative steps, these steps are actually the stages that we're discussing. Meaning, for example, if someone says, like what the men of religion have said, for example, that a cell transformed into an animal millions of years, that's transmutation. That's not evolution. But evolution says that there are stages, very, very slow stages between, like, for example, a cell, like a bacterial cell, for example, to an animal. Because you know that multiple bursts, if we looked at the earth layers, there's like bacterial cells, then eukaryotes. After eukaryotes, you have multicellular organisms. After multicellular organisms, you have fish. After fish, you have amphibians. After amphibians, land animals. Then you have animals, mammals, and so then you have modern human species, or hominids, and then you have human species out of that. So there's like stages. These are the multiple bursts in in creation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supports through this text, through this verse. It says that we created you in stages. So these are the stages that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about. And it doesn't go against science. It's not something unscientific. It supports science. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supports evolution. He supports science, not the other way around, in which the men of religion have ignorantly opposed in their writings, in their books. And there's a lot of examples of that, these turtles, these ignorant arguments.
Right.
Absolutely. Brother Muhammad, interesting that you say that. I know the Ahmed al-Hassan, peace be upon him, in his book, The Atheism Delusion, I believe it's on page 42, he talks about the religious scholars or the people that are refuting evolution seem to have no understanding of what evolution actually is, or how it occurs scientifically. An example of something he says in the book is that some of the people who challenge the theory of evolution assume that evolutionary biology states that compound and complex organs such as the eye came into existence through a single mutation. And he continues to say that Darwin himself doesn't even say that, let alone any modern scientist. So my question, and perhaps this will be beneficial to the listeners out there, and a lot of people simply just don't understand what evolution is. So if we could perhaps maybe simplify what exactly is evolution referring to when we say evolution, what does it really mean, and how can we simplify that concept for the listener?
Yeah, like evolution, it requires heredity, it requires variation, it requires reproduction, and it also requires natural selection. So if you don't have these things in evolution, you're not talking about evolution. So if you say, like, for example, a cell turns into a plant all of a sudden, just like that, okay? Or saying that evolutionary biologists, they dictate or state that a cell turns into an animal or a cell turns into a plant, transforms.
Right.
In this sort of language, I mean, it's just, it's just not, concurring with science. It is unscientific. That is not evolution. You have to know what evolution actually means. There has to be, comparative anatomy. It has to be genetic science. There has to be historical geology. You need to have these things when you're discussing evolution. I mean, these are all scientific facts. And
right.
Evolution is taught in universities. People, they go to school, they learn biology, they learn evolution and these things, but not in a way how single burst creationism proposes, saying that as we said, like sudden bursts or the sudden emergence of the eye, or the sudden emergence of an animal, or saying that humans, they come from apes just like that. No, this is unscientific. Evolution doesn't say that. This is something that is unscientific, unacademic. It is baseless. It is not what it's almost a lie, to just say that this is what evolutionists say, this is what Charles Darwin says. No, he doesn't say that. So
right.
there needs to be some grasp with basic knowledge of evolution. As soon as when you have this basic grasp, just build on it and read about it more, research, and know the principles of evolution. Know what natural selection means, like how there's like survival of the fittest, and how like one species competes with another species, and there's a lot of specific details in the book Atheism, Delusion on that. And so there's a lot of like arguments. Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan, peace be upon him, not only does he speak about comparative anatomy, he also talks about, for example, the general principle of cosmic evolution to life on Earth, and he talks about the evolution at the level of the universe as a whole, and like how the universe, it started off with a singularity, and then it started to cool down and then expand, and so you have this complexity, complexity occurring through the universe, and
Indeed.
This is just the proof of evolution. Evolution in terms of origin of matter, not the origin of species. There's origin of species and origin of matter. So he talks about the origin of matter, and he also discussed the origin of species in his book in chapter 2. So there's a lot of things.
Right. I mean, going back to the Dr. Richard Dawkins' claim of there's no intelligent design. I mean, how would you answer that, Brother Muhammad? If you can just sort of, in simplest terms. I mean,
yeah.
What does Sayyid Ahmed Hassan concur with? I mean, from what we read, that he doesn't deny it. Actually, I mean, he doesn't deny that there is this laryngeal nerve, and he also, agrees that it's non-random. So, where is Dr. Richard Dawkins left off?
Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan says, he says that we will discuss this argument, meaning in chapter 2, we will discuss this argument and show that the defect in body structuring that happened during the evolutionary process is not a viable argument against the law-abiding and purposeful nature of evolution. The first genetic plan is purposeful and law-abiding, and therefore indicates a lawmaker and designer who set it down in order to achieve a specific result. Indeed, the matter of the recurrent laryngeal nerve refutes the claims of those who believe that creation occurred in a single burst and who deny evolution. Because all design and implementation occurring in a single burst requires negation of this defect that we see in the elongation of the recurrent laryngeal nerve. In fact, even if we were to say that the elongation of the recurrent laryngeal nerve is beneficial, it wouldn't change the fact that it is a historical evolutionary inheritance that opposes creation occurring in a single burst. So this design is opposing that creation is in a single burst, and it's in support of creationism in multiple bursts, meaning through an evolutionary process. And so, and as we said, that God, he spoke about evolution when he says that we created you in stages. So there are multiple bursts in creationism, not a single burst. If we say that it's a single burst, we're trying to like respond against evolution and clear facts and clear scientific proof of evolution, which is like, it's nonsensical, to be honest. So we can't go against proof in front of our eyes that is shown through comparative anatomy, through the through the rock layers of the earth, and through genetic science, through this genetic language, this beautiful language, this complexity in our genes, these this self-replication, this self-replication process that occurs within our bodies.
Yep, I mean, like we mentioned, he proposes this far-fetched theory where, there was this small chance of having life on this earth, which he pretty much, they're nothing short of miracles, and he can't prove that scientifically, but he also can't prove a lawmaker or a speaker. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we appreciate his research, but, I mean, isn't he also in the same category? I mean, he's more knowledgeable in his work, but, I mean, aren't they all, like, fallible beings, if you will? I mean, how can they...
I mean, they've actually, they were, you can say they had, he was unable to prove with scientific facts the first self-replicating protein on this earth. Like, how did it emerge from non-living matter? He never showed us any scientific fact or scientific proof of how this happened. He was presenting hypothesis after hypothesis, and this is what atheists do. The atheists, they can't answer this question. It's still standing until today. How did life emerge? The first replicators, this RNA world, how did it first emerge on this earth? They don't have any scientific facts. Yes, they have explanations, but they're all hypothetical. They're all not based on science. So it really, put them in trouble. This is the troubling question that they never found any evidence for. So there is a purpose. So they can only say that it's a miracle that occurred. That there is a lawmaker who set this purpose, who created the first the self-replicating protein. He's the one who created this. These amino acids, the DNA and RNA. I mean, this complexity. I mean, it happened like by chance. It didn't come by accident. There has to be an originator to that. There has to be a creator who started this all. So this is our argument. There's a lawmaker and not something else. It's not a chance. There is a lawmaker, and that is God. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right.
There's a lawmaker, there's a purpose behind it, and Imam alayhi salam gradually goes into further into the book. Inshallah, God willing, we'll have the time to go over it in the near future, but he does prove, hence his divine intervention in this, the divine intervention, being the successor of God on this earth, in this topic, in this field of science. I mean, gradually from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 6, it's, believe 500 plus pages, where he speaks about all these theories and puts them all together and brings the truth out for everyone to see, that there is a lawmaker, there is a speaker, there is a purpose behind everything. I just want to quote from the chapter 6. Sayyid alayhi salam says, if quantum mechanics represents the laws of reality and there is not the slightest flaw in the Copenhagen interpretation, then the experiment has highlighted the oddity of the reality of the universe we live in. The result we have reached at this point is that should the wave function collapse due to the observer or the recording of the quantum event by the observer, as the Copenhagen interpretation states, it would mean that if it were not for the existence of the human being or the intelligent being, there would be no universe. The universe owes its existence to our observation of it, as the entire universe is a quantum system with a wave function and many possibilities. It only exists when we observe it and the wave function collapses and appears in reality. This issue means that we humans, or let us say intelligence, represents the axis for which the universe was brought into existence. And there's actually a hadith Qudsi, which is basically, it's like the narration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If not for you, I would not have created the galaxies.
Yes, so, the one from Imam Ali, peace be upon him.
Right.
You know, there's, like Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan also goes on talking about genetic evidence, and there's this, the fusion of chromosome 2 in humans. And he quotes Dr. Jacob Ijdu from the University of Iowa. He says, the data we present here demonstrate that a telomere to telomere fusion of ancestral chromosomes occurred, leaving a pathonomic relic at band 2q13. This fusion accounts for the reduction of 24 pairs of chromosomes in the great apes, chimpanzee, orangutan, and gorilla to 23 in modern human, and must therefore have been a relatively recent event. So Sayyid Ahmed al-Hassan talks about a fusion of chromosome 2 in humans. Like as we know that in humans there are like 23 pairs of chromosomes, and while the rest of the great apes, they have 24. So there is a reason why, like, you know, we have like 23 pairs of chromosomes instead of 24. And the reason is because of this telomere to telomere fusion that occurred to like the human being way back, like you can say a few million years ago. This thing happened because when we're talking about, like, for example, the Homo sapiens, that they evolved from let's say Neanderthals and previous species, this occurred through like genetic science proves that there are like some traces that the human being or like there's like proof that the human being evolved from other hominids. So even in our genetic you know, in our own genes and our chromosome, it has this trace of us being like of evolution. There's trace of evolution in our own genes. So Sayyid Ahmed Hassan discusses this, the fusion of chromosome 2 in humans, and he talks about it in a lengthy manner, and it's in pages 75 to 76, and goes on talking. So yeah, there's a lot of detail, and it's very interesting. In fact, this is one of the most interesting things to know about yourself, to know what to know this chromosome 2 phenomena that occurred to the human being a few millions years ago. Like, so yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of detail and there's a lot of discussion, explanations. The book is just filled with knowledge, and I just would love to invite any person out there to just give this book a read and see how much science it bears and how much arguments, scientific arguments it proposes in siding with evolution and not opposing evolution. So
also people, you can check out the double slit experiment. It's very interesting.
Chapter 6, yes.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's very interesting. The whole book is very interesting. That's basically God's intervention, basically explaining everything we've learned in universities and in our science books, and putting it all into perspective. I mean, when I was growing up, I used to read those verses in the Quran where it says, speaking in plural form, and we created this and that, and basically it's all clear now by the Sayyid alayhi salam's book, and basically it goes into it after chapter 2 and explains how there's different creators, how you have the original creator, the God or absolute God, and then you have a creation who's doing the creating on God's behalf, but these creators are not perfect, they're not absolute. So basically, I mean, people maybe can relate, that there was a beginning of this universe, and we don't have, for God, we don't say He has a beginning. Everything that has a beginning.
There's also one thing I want to point out is that, rejecting evolution today is like rejecting that the Earth revolves around the sun. It's the same thing. I mean, theory of evolution is a scientific fact, and the Earth spinning around the sun, it's a scientific fact. If you reject evolution, it's like rejecting that the Earth spins around the sun. So there's so much evidence to the theory of evolution, and it's unwise to prefer to want to oppose it or try to refute it. I mean, facts. You can't refute facts. You need scientific facts to refute facts, and there's no scientific facts that refute evolution. Like, for example, when it comes to like Wahhabi Salafis, we discussed their matter in the previous program, that they take things literally when it comes to interpretations. That when the sun moves and like prostrates beneath the throne, they take this literally, as if the sun itself is actually doing that, when it's not actually moving or doing that. So the interpretation of ambiguous verses of the Quran or ambiguous hadiths that the Wahhabis don't understand, they sometimes interpret them in a manner where, as I said, they take it literally, meaning like it's actually what it's saying, but it's not saying that. So it needs someone who is divinely appointed for ambiguous verses and ambiguous hadiths, and needs someone who is divinely appointed to direct the person reading to what it's actually saying. So the divinely appointed people, as what I believe in, they're appointed by God. Like Sayyid Ahmed al-Hasan, he's appointed by God and knows what Allah's words are saying and knows what the hadiths are saying. So what the Wahhabi sheikhs and Wahhabi Salafi sheikhs are doing is that they take things literally, and they don't know the meaning of these ambiguous verses and ambiguous hadiths. So so they went against science. So basically the result of them taking things literally is that they went against science and fought science, and so they went farther away from the true religion of God. The true religion of God is with evolution, and we already proved that. There are verses from the Quran, and we show that in chapter of Nuh.
Guys, we are approaching our time limit today. Just to summarize, I think we've made it pretty clear that the people of religion, or the ones that are arguing against evolution, are clearly not doing the right thing. They're either distorting the true definition of evolution, or they're trying to twist it. And the Imam Ahmad al-Hassan, peace be upon him, says that in his book, he says that in order for these guys to refute the theory that is very well established in universities around the world, they should come at it from a scientific approach and not try to distort the actual meaning of it. And he begins chapter 2, which is something we can pick up on our future episode. He begins by chapter 2 is entitled "Accepting Evolution is Unavoidable," and then he goes into describing the two parts that the theory of evolution is divided into. So hopefully we can carry our conversation forward on next week's episode from this point, if you guys are up for it.
Right. God willing.
Sure. God willing.
We will further talk about how evolution reaches knowing God, and it has a purpose.
Right.
God willing, we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. I think another important thing we should tackle on next week is many atheists believe that evolution is real, however it has no purpose. Whereas in the Atheism Delusion, Ahmad al-Hassan, peace be upon him, provides us with what that purpose is, which is arriving at the intelligence machine, which is the modern human brain. So, we can get into those topics as well on our next episode. And I thank you guys again for joining the discussion today. Also to all the listeners who tuned in. And if there's any questions that arose from our conversation today, please leave messages on our Facebook page at the Savior Radio Show, and we'll see to it that they're addressed. And if we don't do it online, then we'll definitely bring them up on next week's episode.
Thank you, brother.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks to all the listeners. Farewell, and we'll be joining you guys next week.
أحمد في العلوم منار